Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mago Nutrition Podcast, where we answer your questions and give you practical nutrition strategies to help you and your family flourish. I'm here today with Mark, and we have a question more towards lifestyle today. So if you are someone wondering how to balance strength training and cardio, this is definitely an episode for you. We really love answering questions, so feel free to submit your own at Imago Nutrition, IMAGO, nutrition.com/podcast. And we'd love to feature that as one of our episodes. So, Mark, what kind of question we have today?
Yeah, this is a good one. I'm excited. We do focus predominantly on nutrition, but there's always overlap, when we're working with people and clients and helping them, build long-term wellness. And so there's a lot of crossover with strength training, cardiovascular training, activity, as I would just call it in general terms as well. So this is a really great question. So David in California asks, what is a good balance of weightlifting and cardio? Is there a ratio? And so this is a terrific question. And David, let me answer your question immediately, but I'm also going to ask that you stick around because there's a lot of considerations. Okay. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't like either, I want you to stick around. If you're like, I really like strength training, but I don't like cardio, I want you to stick around. If someone's like, I love cardio, but I don't like strength training, I want you to stick around. And so if you love both, definitely stick around. So it sounds like David is engaged in both, which is ultimately what I think is ideal. And so again, what's a good balance of weightlifting and cardio? Is there a ratio? Here's the short answer. It depends. Okay. Now I know that's a classic answer, but it's an honest one. And if anyone sells you something prepackaged as an answer, they're probably selling you something more than just an answer. They've already got a program. They've got something that they're going to try to sell you. And so all that's to say, it does depend. And so Danielle and I are going to walk through some considerations. But I wanted to start actually, Danielle, perhaps just on a personal level. And because I know you were a D1 athlete. Okay. So I was a D3 athlete. So I was 3 times worse than you. So you were a D1 athlete, and I know you were a high school, you were an athlete before college. And you're now, a mother, a wife, a working professional after college. And so along with myself, I was, an athlete before college, during college, after college. I'm now maintaining, activity. And so I'm curious sort of what have these two modalities, if you will, how have these sort of evolved for you from early years into college? And then how has that changed coming out of college? I'm just curious. And I only gave you a short heads up before we hit record that I was going to do this. So this is off script. I'm just curious, what has your experience been with both of these to varying degrees on the weightlifting side, which we'll also call strength training, or the cardiovascular training side? So I'm genuinely curious because I don't know if I've heard all of these details, even though we're related now.
So I started swimming because my parents got a boat and they didn't want me to drown. So that is how my sport got chosen. No, I did do basketball. I did basketball. And I love that too, but swimming kind of took over pretty early. And in swimming, actually in high school, it was mainly cardio, obviously, 2-a-day practices most days. But I started strength training in high school. And I actually loved it because it was kind of just a break from the pool, and I didn't feel like I could get enough of those. So I did love it for that aspect. And then when I got to college, I think I loved it a little less. But again, it was still a good break from the pool. And I think, as a girl, I just didn't like the bulky muscles, and they were making me lift really heavy weights. And that's probably why I didn't really like it as much in college, because I felt like I was really bulky. And so then after I got married and had a baby and, completely let go of strength training when I was married, I still loved cardio 110%. Did more running than swimming, just because of access to a pool. But anyway, I saw my muscle go away and I was really excited about that, but I wanted
Oh
to maintain
no.
some of that. So I did start like more so like strength exercise videos. Some of them were like hit based, and some of them were maybe a little bit more, I don't know, less cardio is what I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
say. But yeah, I never really went back per se in a routine fashion to the gym and just focused on weights. I probably would be a little lost. I'd know what I was just doing, but to come up with my own workout would be not as fun for me. So
Gotcha. That's interesting. Yeah, my story with at least weight, I'd been playing sports, since I was really little. Got introduced to the weight room in high school via a class. Actually, it was a summer class, and it was something that you could letter in. And so on my letter jacket, which I have stuffed in a way closet somewhere, I have my major sports that I played. But there's also a barbell on it because I did the weightlifting program, and I lettered because there was two ways you could letter. You could have these achievements, and I forget exactly what it was. It was probably something like, bench press 150% of your body weight, or squat 200%, or, some of those sort of things. I took the easy route, which was I just had perfect attendance the entire summer, and that lettered for me. So it wasn't that I wasn't there to, get better. I definitely was. But I was also determined to just stay active during the summer. I was just working over the summer, not in any, sport over the summer. So for me, it was like, all right, my goal is to just do 100% attendance. And I think you could miss like one maybe or something like that. And so I did that a couple summers. But again, it was with this idea of like just maintaining muscle, maintaining my athletic prowess, in a off season. And then there was a little bit of strength training, I think, with my wrestling. So I did wrestling, soccer. I did one season of football, but wrestling, soccer, and track in high school. And there was some for wrestling. We would have those 2 days. We would do strength training before school started, and we do wrestling practice afterwards. And that was really around just not losing muscle during the season, because we're all typically cutting weight, doing a ton of cardio, ton of conditioning with wrestling. And so that was really just about like save what you've got. With track, they pressed us a little bit more, and I was a long jumper, a triple jumper, and a sprinter. So there was a lot of leg work, which was cool. I still don't have like super well developed legs, but was pretty strong relative to my weight and height, I guess. And so then I got into college and switched over to rugby. I did one year of track, the NCAA, and then I switched over to club rugby. And so that's when I kind of started getting into, I'm a scrawny guy that was kind of fast, but maybe I need to put on a little bit of muscle. So started kind of researching that, but didn't go very crazy in college, just enjoyed it from time to time with friends. But for me, it was definitely after college, it was like, okay, don't have formal sports anymore. What am I going to do? How am I going to train? I want to continue to be athletic. I want to continue to be strong. I want to challenge myself. I want to push myself. I want to have routine. So that's where I did start to utilize the gym a lot more. I tend to prefer strength over cardio, unless that cardio involves kicking a ball into a net, which is my preferred form. And so for me, just running is super boring. Just jogging for the sake of jogging sounds like, some strange form of method to me, or method of torture to me. But all that said, I've grown, I think, in both areas and come to appreciate both. So that's why I love this question. Again, the question is, what's the good balance of these two? And the answer is really, it depends. Okay. So we're going to walk through some considerations, but first I just wanted to kind of gloss over a massive list. We'll start with strength training of benefits for strength training. So if someone's out there being like, I don't really need a balance, I don't really care about this, I don't really care about that one, I want to challenge you to think more holistically about the benefits, because the benefits to strength training and the benefits of cardio are robust, and they seem to be growing every day as more and more research is done. And so I believe we're actually in a golden era of research as it relates to strength training, because for decades, to be honest, strength training had, in years past in American history, had a bad rap. I mean, there were people literally touring the country telling people not to lift weights. You're going to become immobile. You're going to have an increased chance of heart attack. You're increasing your blood pressure, all this sort of stuff. There was all this negative negativity around strength training, which, by the way, they were confusing with bodybuilding. That's the irony. They were telling people not to lift weights because they were just assuming certain things about the sport of bodybuilding, which are not applicable to people that are just engaging in strength training. Okay. So keep in mind, when I talk about strength training, I'm not talking about bodybuilding. Those are different forms within the same sport. Okay. Or within the same, I guess, training modality, if you will. Anyways, all that's to say tons of benefits on both sides that I think we should all appreciate to a certain degree. Okay. So let's talk about some of the benefits of strength training. I'll kind of rattle these off if you don't mind, Danielle. I've got a long list. And by the way, every single one of these is backed up by peer-reviewed research. It's not because Mark wants there to be this benefit, I hope, or even that I've experienced these in my own life. Every single one of these has some deep methodological backing to it that we've seen in research and in the literature. So number one, strength training, yes, you can imagine it does make you stronger. But I want to say, so while that's great, and there may be practical need for that, right? Like a lot of times guys are like, yes, want to be stronger. The question is why, right? I want to be stronger so that when guys run into me on the soccer field, they're like, well, he's actually kind of strong for not being that big, right? But keep in mind that strength also increases stability. Okay. And that's really, really big long-term. Again, you and I are not, college athletes anymore. So the question is, why do we train? Right. Or in adulthood in general, why train? As you get later in life, this is going to be one of those huge reasons why you train. You're stronger, you're more stable, which decreases your risks of falls and injuries. And the mortality rate on people that suffer a severe fall later in life is astronomical. It's a hockey stick effect when it comes to your mortality. And so this ultimately equals, right? So if stronger equals more stable equals less chance of falls and injuries, that equals greater independence later in life. Okay. And that's ultimately something that we should be mapping to. There was a fascinating study that came out of Sweden that talked about athletes that continued training and mapped their ability to live independently into their 90s. And it's pretty amazing because you see in America, come mid 70s, come 80s, we tend to be on a pretty fast road to assisted living. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've lost muscle, we've lost strength, we've lost stability, we've increased our chance of risk of falls and injury if we're living alone, et cetera. So all that's to say, that's a huge map. Do you want to say something on that?
Yeah,
I know
Jared
Danielle.
wants to...
Go ahead.
Jared's goal is to be bowling at 90. So
Oh man, that's a good one. I
So
don't like bowling, but
I know.
I'll have to talk to my brother about that. He needs bigger goals. He needs better goals.
If you think of a 90-year-old bowling, that's a pretty strong 90-year-old. So
That's
I think
true.
that's, yeah.
And so for those of you that don't know, Jared is my brother, Danielle's husband. He's my baby brother, 4 years younger, but 4 times smarter. So he's a doctor of physical therapy. And so he is wise in, I'm sure, why he chose bowling. I just think bowling as a sport is boring. So, but you're right. Like picking up, I don't know, what are those balls? 12 pounds, 15-pound balls, and being able to stabilize yourself, walk up to a line, successfully roll that thing. I get it. All right, Jared's kind of smart. So. And okay, so I won't do this for every bullet, but number whatever bullet is building muscle. By the way, this increases your metabolic rate. The more muscle tissue you have, the higher your resting metabolic rate is. Okay, so that's really important. That's also something that helps keep excessive weight or fat off longer, is by having a really solid engine underneath the hood, and muscle is that for us. Keep in mind that you lose about 3 to 8% of your muscle mass per decade starting in your 30s. Okay, so I would argue if you're in your 30s or later, you may be lifting heavy and hard intently year-round just to not lose 3.8% of your muscle. It's not that you're always going to be gaining. After the age of 30, you can absolutely be lifting again intently and just maintaining. Okay.
Did you say 3.8 or 3
No,
to
sorry,
8?
3 to 8%, depends on a lot of different things, but 3 to 8% of muscle mass, and I've got the citation for that, is lost per decade. So per decade, not per year, per decade, beginning in your 30s, and that's substantial. And by the way, that rate of decrease increases after the age of 60 pretty dramatically. Okay. So again, you may be, quote, gaining just to maintain. All right. Strength training, by the way, helps burn calories efficiently. Now, I maintain that burning calories is the last reason you should work out. Dead last. Of a trillion reasons why you should work out, burning calories should not be really a focus or a purpose. It should just be the outcome of producing work in an environment. But I will say this, one of the cool things about strength training is that your body increases its metabolic rate for up to 72 hours after a strength training session. Why? Because it's going through repair and recovery, and that requires additional caloric burn. That is not the case necessarily with cardiovascular training, especially if it doesn't have what we call mechanical tension involved. So if you just go for a long run, you're going to actually burn more calories running than you would lifting weights for an hour. Yes, but that caloric burn ends as soon as you're done running. That caloric burn continues after a strength training session, again, for 1 to 3 days. Some people call it the afterburn effect. It's really just the outcome of your body repairing, going through inflammation, going through recovery, repairing muscles, hopefully recruiting new muscle fibers to whether to keep your muscles healthy or to gain. So all that's to say, this is what I would generally call efficient calorie burning, because you're going to burn more calories for 3 days based off one workout. Okay. It can reduce body fat, which helps you appear leaner. Gone are the days of, I think, men or women that we should be looking to or wanting to look skinny. I think, the term that was used, skinny, back in the 80s and 90s, that came out of kind of model culture. I think that's far outdated. It's a massively insufficient mentality. I think we may want to look lean. We may want to look athletic. We may want to look toned. These are different terms. And really what that means is having muscle underneath your skin and being able to expose that muscle. That's really what gives you that lean look. Helps manage blood sugar levels, promotes greater mobility and flexibility. Strength training, this is a fun one. Strength training lengthens muscles. Fun fact, yoga does not. I can't tell you how many women, when they say, I do yoga, I'm like, why do you do it? And there are valid reasons to do yoga. I'm not harping on yoga. But so many of them are like, I just want to elongate my muscles. I want to have these long feminine muscles. Well, the irony is if you want longer muscles, you should be lifting weights, not doing yoga. Now, you may like it for the breath work. You may like it for the hot yoga. You might like it for the sweat. You might like it for the camaraderie, the music, the instructor. There's a ton of reasons, right? Stretching is a good thing. I'm not harping on it. However, on the claim that I'm doing it because I want to lengthen my muscles, if you want to lengthen your muscles, research would say that you should be strength training. It strengthens bones, by the way. So loading weight, mechanical tension on your bones strengthens your bones. Now we'll get into some of the mental stuff real quick. It boosts self-esteem and mood through many different mechanisms. It improves brain health, particularly the executive function is something that I've seen in recent research being improved with consistent resistance training. It improves heart health. Yes, there is a cardio component to strength training. Okay. It reduces depressive symptoms, fascinatingly enough, in both people with clinical depression and those without it. So keep in mind that you can have depressive symptoms without having clinical depression. I've gone through seasons of life where I've battled depressive symptoms, though I don't believe, nor was I ever diagnosed to have depression. And so what they would say in research is in healthy and unhealthy adults. I don't really like that phrasing because it seems like, oh, you're healthy and you're not. That's too binary for me. What we're talking about is people with or without clinical depression, depressive symptoms have reduced. It promotes better quality of life. I could go on and on and on. Those are some of the benefits of strength training. Okay. So any thoughts on that, Danielle, as we kind of wiped through those in a few minutes? Hopefully that it was clear and I made the case that what I believe is that everyone should be strength training.
Yeah, I think the bone density for women is probably one of the favorites of mine for that, because I think it's kind of interesting how men towards strength and they actually have a little bit more heart disease, gender prevalence or whatever, and women tend towards cardio, and we tend towards more of osteoporosis and things like that. So the shift needs to happen a little bit, but more so combination. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Then I wanted to pull out one real thing. We'll talk about the benefits of cardio. David, we're going to get to some considerations for your question. So hang with us. So I did want to pull out this. So I want to talk about the benefits. Then I want to do a quick breakdown for both strength and cardio. So those are all the benefits. Here's the breakdown, because some of you may be asking, okay, well, what is strength training, right? There's a couple different things that are at play. One of that, perhaps one of the main ones is what's known as progressive overload. Okay. That is essentially where the volume of weight that you are moving over time is increasing. And I'll explain a little bit what that looks like here in a second. So what I want to do is give you sort of a framework or a foundation for strength training. Now, this is not me. This is not my idea, my views. This is very technically, and you can Google this and actually look up the paper. It's about a 30-page paper that was produced by the International Universities Strength and Conditioning Association. So it's the IUSCA. There's a paper authored by the first name is a man by the name of Brad Schoenfeld. Incredible mind, arguably the forefront of strength training and conditioning. And so this is what is known as the resistance training recommendations. I'm reading it to make sure I get it right. Resistance training recommendations to maximize muscle hypertrophy, which just means growth, in an athletic population. This is the position stand of the IUSCA, again, the International Universities Strength and Conditioning Association. Okay. Here's their recommendations. There's a 30-page paper. You can read through it. I'm going to distill it into 6 bullets for you. Okay. Here's the 30-page summary. Number 1, you want to be working each muscle group that you want to develop. Okay. With at least 10 intense sets taken to near failure, which means you can only do 1 or 2 more reps. You do not have to actually fail out. Okay. 10 intense sets taken to near failure per week. Okay. So let's think of one muscle group. If you want your chest, so let's say your pecs, to be challenged and to grow and to develop, you need to hit your chest, just your chest, with at least 10 intense sets taken to near failure per week. Okay. And so then the recommendation for, okay, well, how many reps? This would say that you should work in the 6 to 12 rep range most often. Now, I love that they say most often because it doesn't mean there's no benefit at 4, there's no benefit at 15. Of course, there's benefits. However, working in the 6 to 12 rep range most often, and interestingly enough, on the lower end of that, closer to 6, you're going to get more strength results. Closer to 12, you're going to get more muscle growth. Okay. And those work in concert, by the way. You need strength to be able to challenge your muscles to grow. You need those muscles to grow to help increase your strength. So they work together. But at least 10 intense sets taken to near failure per week, work in the 6 to 12 rep range most often. It's important to work a muscle group from a variety of angles. Okay, so chest, classic example. One exercise could be bench press. Another exercise could be incline bench press. It could be decline bench press. All 3 of those are barbell exercises that are challenging your chest, but from 3 different angles. And then you could do all 3 of those, but with dumbbells. Now you've got 6 exercises in your repertoire. Okay. You should rest, I believe, at least, okay, they say 1 to 2 minutes between each set. This is actually to reduce cardio impact, okay, on purpose. It's to allow your body to have enough rest so that you can build up adenosine triphosphate, which is your body's energy currency, so that you can perform another intense set. A lot of people get into these circuit things, and what happens is that there can be some interference. As cardio capacity or cardio work goes up, your strength benefit can go down, or your ability to move weight can go down, and that's okay. Okay. Within
I
the
did not know that.
Yes. So again, now this is one where we have to take a balanced approach, because the gym bros are like, that's why I don't do cardio. But then there's the people that are like, no, you should just be doing jumping jacks in between sets. There's a balance. Okay. And so, yes, there is what's known as an interference effect. Cardiovascular training and resistance training can interfere with each other. Okay. So all that's to say, some of that circuit training that you see people do has a depreciating rate of return as a strength outlet. Okay. As opposed, because as that cardio is going up and you're putting more and more into your cardiovascular system, your ability to move weight goes down. And just think about that. It'd be like if you had to run 3 miles and every half mile you had to stop and do bench press. You're not going to be able to increase or even maintain that strength work that you're doing on the bench press every half mile. Why? Is your body is starting to utilize those energies for the cardiovascular training, right? So anyways, all that's to say, when I do strength training, I rest at least 2 to 3 minutes between sets. Okay. But they say I wish they had said at least. They just say rest 1 to 2 minutes between each set. Okay. And then frequency, or how often you train, is less important than total volume. So what I mean by this is, some people are like, well, how often should I train? The question is lifestyle, sustainability, et cetera, which we'll get to. But keep in mind that if you are participating in strength training, you should see volume go up. Now, what some of you just heard was weight should always go up. And I didn't say that. I said volume should be going up gradually over time. Keep in mind, in terms of, let's go back to bench press, the amount of reps I do, the amount of sets I do, and the amount of weight that I do, reps times sets times weight equals volume. So if you're going up in reps, but you're at the same weight, you're going up in volume. Or if you're doing the same reps and doing more sets at the same weight, you're going up in volume. Okay. It doesn't always mean going up in weight, but the combination of those three, and you can just do some simple math. So you can just write it down on a piece of paper, the reps you do, the sets you do, and the weight you do, multiply those, equal volume. And then as you change those variables, check and see if your volume is going up. But I've seen people that go down 2 reps and then go up in weight, and they're actually moving less volume, but they think they're getting stronger. Okay. So all that's to say, that is the recommendation of the IUSCA. Work the muscle groups that you want to challenge. Keep in mind, we just used one, chest. There's also back. There's quads. There's hamstrings. There's calves. There's biceps. There's triceps. There's shoulders. There's traps, right? So it's a lot of muscle groups that you can challenge. Those that you want to develop, 10 intense sets, taken to near failure per week, 6 to 12 reps most often. Work the muscle from a variety of angles. Rest 1 to 2 minutes, I would say minimum, between each set. And remember to track your volume. If your volume isn't going up, your body's not adapting. Okay, you may be lifting more weight than you did last week, but it doesn't mean you're moving more volume. Okay. So with that, that's my little riff there before we get into cardio benefits. Any thoughts on that, Danielle?
That's great.
Cool.
I learned a lot.
All right. Real quick. So now we're into your favorite. Okay. So cardio, you're one of those weird people. No, I'm just kidding. So cardiovascular training is important. Okay. And I'm going to hit both sides here in a second because, some people like to lean one way or the other, myself included, but I really do want to take this balanced approach. So we need to remember that cardiovascular health is paramount. Okay. Paramount. Heart disease. And this is one of many factors and one of many things that you can do to reduce your risk. Along with strength training. But heart disease is the number one cause of premature death in America and the world. Okay. So we can't emphasize the importance of heart health more. It is the single greatest cause of premature death. Okay. Cardiovascular training is safe and effective for most people. It is relatively easily accessible and sustainable. I love what you said earlier, right? So as soon as you were pulled out of a collegiate pool and didn't have access, and maybe you do have a community pool, but we know now you're fighting crowds, now you're fighting for lane time, now you got a schedule, but you've got work, you've got family, right? It becomes less, or it can become more challenging. However, like you said, you could take to the streets, you can involve yourself in things like walking or running or biking or hiking, etc. And you're still in the pool. We know you still swim. But I've had clients in places that have really deep winters, right? And they're able to go to the mall. They're able to still participate, even though there's a ton of snow outside. That you can find ways to access cardiovascular, training that doesn't require a gym, doesn't require weights, doesn't require equipment, and that's one of the most useful things about cardio. I've also worked with musicians here in Nashville, right, that are on the road. They don't have a gym every night. They're living in a bus, but gosh darn it, they can go for a brisk walk every day, and they might not be able to lift weights, but that cardio comes in really, really handy, and it's just really good for so many reasons. Cardiovascular training is particularly effective in reducing visceral fat. You know this as well as I do. So visceral fat is deep inside the abdomen cavity as opposed to subcutaneous fat, which is just beneath the skin. And visceral fat is far more dangerous than subcutaneous fat. And they've done studies where they've controlled this. And even when the study participants are controlled so that they don't lose weight, they have found that cardiovascular training, particularly high intensity interval training, reduces visceral fat, even if the client or the participant is not losing weight overall, which is fascinating. So your body begins to shift and pull from some of those very dangerous energy stores deep within your abdomen when it participates. And that's one of the functions of the cardiovascular system and one of the benefits of cardio. It also helps regulate blood sugar, like strength training, reduces chronic pain, improves cognitive function, strengthens the immune system, it boosts your mood, also reduces your risk of falls, lowers the risk of many health problems. It actually aids in sleep. I have personally experienced this. If I lift weights before I go to bed, I have a hard time going to sleep. I think it has to do with blood pressure. I think it has to do with cortisol. I think it has to do with a transient stress effect. Whereas when I play soccer in my indoor league, I play a 2-hour game from like 7 to 9 once or twice a week. You can't keep me awake come 10 o'clock after those games. Like, it just helps me sleep so much. So anyways, those are just some of the benefits that I dug up from research. Any thoughts or additions on that, Danielle, apart from you just lighting up and loving this cardio stuff?
I think it just helps me, de-stress,
Yeah.
like turn your mind off and just breathe. So,
yep. And both forms do that. That's one of the cool things is that, I think I even said that in a class that when we talked about the classes we're teaching at church, and we just went over, strength and cardio in our recent class, and keeping in mind that purposed stress is often one of the best de-stressors. So purposed stress is what you go through when you go through strength training. Purposed stress is what you go through when you participate in cardiovascular training. Purposed stress can be one of the best de-stressors in your life. And there's a lot of talk about, stress management, which we believe in. And we believe nutrition is a part of that. Strength is a part of that. Cardio is a part of that. Sleep is a part of that. Lots of many things. But all that's to say, you're right, is that as a de-stressor and a mood elevator, it's really, really tough to beat strength training and cardiovascular training or some combination. Okay. And then real quick, I just want to unpack, just keep in mind that there's, in general, 3 buckets of cardiovascular training. Some people hear, when I say cardio or you say cardio, some people harken back to gym class and all they think about is running. And they're like, I hate that. I hate cardio. But keep in mind that cardiovascular training comes in no less than 3 buckets: LISS, MISS, and HIT. LISS is LISS, low intensity, steady state cardio. Lots I could say on this. We won't go into it. Just know that low intensity, steady state cardio is something that gets your heart rate elevated slightly, and you could do it for a long period of time. That's just the easiest way to break all of this down. It's highly individualistic, by the way. Going for a brisk walk for someone could be low intensity. For other people, it could be high intensity, depending on their conditioning. Okay, so this is all very individual based. But in general, relative to someone's health and conditioning, if it just gets your heart rate up a little bit, and you could do it for a long period of time, you're participating in low intensity, steady state. Really, really effective, incredible tool. Does not mean you have to be running or sprinting up a hill or doing anything like that. It could just be going for a brisk walk, get your heart rate up. Okay, that's low intensity. Then there's moderate intensity, steady state, which, as you can imagine, is just something that gets your heart rate up a little bit more from there, right? And it's something that you could do for a moderate amount of time. You might not be able to do it for 3-4 hours, but you could probably do it 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 minutes, okay? Not with ease, but also you're also not passing out at the end of that either, okay? So get your heart rate up a little bit more. You could do it for a moderate amount of time, again, depending on your conditioning, your health. And then there's high intensity interval training. A lot of people have heard of HIIT. This is something that can only be done for a very short period of time because your body will max out its capacity. And I like to kind of make fun of people that do group fitness. I love group fitness. I used to teach group fitness at a university for 9 years. So I love it. But when I hear someone say, oh, I love my HIIT class, and it's, oh, how long is that? It's about an hour long. Whoa, it's probably not HIIT then, because you can't do HIIT for an hour. You might be able to do HIIT for like 10, 15 minutes, but then you got to take a break because you're just maxing out your capacity. Your heart rate's at like 90% plus. Okay, so anyways, not to be a jerk, but just remember that there's low intensity ways to do cardio, there's moderate, and there's high. Okay, and so what you were going through, Danielle, you could probably swim a few laps and and be somewhere between low to moderate at times. Whereas if I jumped in the pool, even though I'm a soccer player, I'd be working so much harder than you. It might be high intensity for me to do 3 laps at half your pace, right? Until I'm conditioned. So again, it's not the activity necessarily. It's really the person and their conditioning. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of set that as a backdrop to remember that when we say cardio, it doesn't mean, oh, I have to go run 10 miles an hour. I'm not doing cardio. That's not the case. So any thoughts on that from the D1 swimmer who loves cardio?
No, but I do remember when we had to run in swimming and I wasn't conditioned for running and I was like, this is so hard. I was dying,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting how your body can be really conditioned in swimming and you like struggle to walk upstairs. I mean, it was pretty sad.
And
how
and so
slow of a
here
runner I was.
and here's a fun fact. Yes, there are some general truths into like no matter who you are, running is probably going to burn the most amount of calories of any cardiovascular training. Swimming would definitely be up there more so than biking, more so than jogging or walking, obviously. But I often get asked, like, what exercise burns the most calories? The answer is technically whichever one you're the worst at, because your body will actually have to overcompensate and work a lot harder. So when a marathon runner goes out and runs 5 miles really fast, their body is very efficient at burning calories. They're built for that. They have trained. Their cardiovascular system has adapted to that. And so you throw them in a pool and tell them to swim their hearts off, for 2 minutes, they're going to be near passing out for a litany of reasons, right? So that is the cool thing, is that your body adapts and adjusts, right? And so just remember that challenging yourself and finding both a balance of where are you conditioning yourself. Like I do want to be conditioned to play a soccer player because I still am. I got to be able to run and sprint and pass the ball and keep my composure for 90 minutes. It's a long time. But it doesn't mean I shouldn't jump in a pool every once in a while. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't get in there when my kids are there and take a couple laps and challenge myself. I'm actually going to get, some really great benefits from thinking outside the box in that regard. Okay. So David, if you're still listening, congrats, you made it. Okay. And to everyone listening, here we are. Back to David's question. What's a good balance of weightlifting and cardio? Is there a ratio? And the answer, as I said at the top of the episode, is it depends. So here's a couple considerations, and Danielle, please jump in when you see fit. Number one, as I hope I have articulated, and this is the reason why I've been talking for a half hour already, is because the first bullet is that everyone should be doing a combination of both. Okay. Again, as I joke, unless you're saying, no, I don't want increased metabolic rate. I don't want to reduce body fat. I don't want to appear leaner. I don't want to, decrease my risk of falls. I don't want to be strong. I don't want to be stable. I don't want to have independence later in life. I don't want to strengthen my bones. I don't want to boost my self-esteem, right? You could do that. If that's you, then definitely don't do strength training, right? But what I would say is that everyone should be doing a combination of both. So as I joke, and I might poke at something you said earlier a little bit, ladies, lifting heavy won't necessarily make you bulky. Now, you may feel bulky. It may be bulky relative to an image you have in your head of what a female should look like. But, and I never do this because I never want people to compare themselves. We can appreciate other people's physiques, though we should not compare ourselves to them, right? Because you could eat and train exactly like someone else for the rest of your life. You'll never look like them. Okay, so just get comparison out of your head. However, if you showed me a couple people that you really respect and appreciate their physique on the female side or the male side, I guarantee you it involves lifting heavier more often than most of us think. But it also involves a healthy dose of cardiovascular training as well, if they are indeed holistically, healthy. So as I say, ladies, lifting won't make you bulky, but I also say, guys, cardio won't kill your gains. Okay, so then guys are like, I'm just working on the muscle thing, so I don't do cardiovascular. Your heart is it's a muscular organ. I know there's a debate about muscle organ, blah, blah, blah. But if you're not training your heart, you're not truly training your musculoskeletal system, all the way down to the most important one, because if the heart stops, none of this matters. Okay. So yes, there is some interference effect. And so, what I teach is that if you need to do cardio and strength in the same workout, do cardio after strength. If possible, do them at different times of the day. And if possible, do them on separate days. Okay. You can create space between those in a way that will minimize the interference effect, and don't overthink it. Don't think because you just did 60 minutes of strength training, you went and did 15 minutes on the elliptical at a moderate intensity, that suddenly all your muscle goes away. It's not the case. Okay. We should do both. Okay. So number one, everyone should be doing a combination of both. Number two, so whether you like strength or cardio or hate the other, vice versa, focus on what could a combination approach look like for you. And then number two is it depends on your goals. Okay. So depending on your goals, you're going to want to emphasize one or the other. Okay. So here's an example. If your goal is to run marathons, and I've worked with marathon runners in the past, if your goal is to run marathons, do you think in the span of a year, you're going to be doing more strength training or more cardio? Of course, more cardio, right? That is your primary goal. However, I have recently worked with a marathon runner. She's up in the Boise, Idaho area, and she has endurance blocks, but she also has strength blocks built into her calendar. And she does strength train year round for the most part, but there is increasing and decreasing capacity for that relative to her primary goal, which is running a full marathon in the fall. So she'll come out of the early part of the year, she'll do a dedicated 8 weeks of mostly strength training with a little bit of cardio. But then she gets back into mostly cardio with a little bit of strength. So keep in mind your goal, your main, or what I call your primary goal, and that's going to help you start to balance the two. And so if you have a predominantly endurance-based goal, you want to start and focus on mostly cardio, and you want muscle and strength gain to supplement that. Now, if your goal is to build muscle, to look athletic, to look lean, you may want to, again, focus predominantly on building muscle and then supplement and support that with cardiovascular training, okay? Number 3, it should be sustainable. No matter what you choose, it needs to be sustainable. Don't come to any arbitrary conclusions because of something you read on BuzzFeed or Reddit about some dude that trained for this thing. And so this was his splits and his breakdown. And then you've got to now do that, or else you're not going to see any goals, or you're not going to see your goals achieved or anything like that. Remember that this needs to be sustainable. So I'm going to talk about a minimum here in a second. But just keep in mind, sustainability is key. Don't spend any time trying to achieve something that you can't achieve long term, okay, for the most part. So remember phasing, as I mentioned. So there's phasing with like marathon training blocks, different seasons of life. Don't hold to some arbitrary standard. You need to make this work into your life in a sustainable way. But here it is, David. For most people, okay, I'm going to set a minimum. Here it is. This is what I want to, and I've got a little bit of a few more bullets that I want to tack onto this. For most people, this would be my recommendation, because I don't know you individually. I don't know your primary goal. I don't know your life, your rhythm, what's sustainable for you. But if you need me to sort of draw a line in the sand and give you a foundation to build from, I would say this: a minimum of 2 to 3 times per week for strength training, and a minimum of 2 to 3 times per week for cardiovascular training. Okay. So yes, that could look like 4 to 6 days a week you're training as a baseline. Okay. It could look like maybe you strength train 3 to 4 times a week and you do 2 days of cardio. It could look like you do 2 days of strength training and you do 3 to 4 days of cardio. It can move and balance based off life, sustainability, goals, etc. But I would say, in general, a minimum of 2 to 3 times per week for both strength and cardio. Okay. So here's a little bit of help on that. If you are going to work in the strength training environment at a minimum, and you're going to say, I'm going to lift weights twice a week, my recommendation would be then those need to be full body workouts. You need to challenge your legs. You need to challenge your chest or your push muscles. You need to challenge your pull muscles, which would be your back and your biceps, pushes, chest, and triceps. You need to have some sort of overhead press movement. Okay. And so there's more. I mean, there's abs, there's secondary muscle or parallel muscle groups, et cetera. But at the very least, if you're working out twice a week, they need to be full body workouts. Going back up to that framework, you need to be hitting those muscle groups with at least 10 intense sets per week for all of those major muscle groups to see healthy adaptation. Okay. So all that's to say, if you can do the bare minimum 2 days a week, but I recommend minimum 2 to 3 times per week in strength. And by the way, the American Heart Association, so going back to kind of that core issue, they recommend at least 2 times a week as well. Okay. So if you need sort of an outside source, you need an organization that has a lot of people paid to read a lot of stuff and make general recommendations to the public, American Heart Association recommends strength training at least twice a week. So I would say 2 to 3. They would say 2. Either way, that's a sort of a minimum. It can go up from there. And then I would say the same for cardiovascular training. The American Heart Association recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity. Okay. So if you can imagine, that's about 2.5 hours. Okay. 2.5 hours, right? Did I get that right? 150 minutes? I was a comm major. I can't do math, because 2 hours would be 120 plus 30 would be 150. Got it. Okay. 2.5 hours. So if you want to translate that into hours, 2.5 hours is what the American Heart Association recommends of moderate intensity. If you are truly participating in vigorous cardiovascular training, That number is about 75 minutes. So it's about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay. So all that's to say, the answer, David, is that you should be doing a combination of both. And I think your question, I think it shows that you are. Two, it depends on your goals. So think about your primary goal, and then how to support that with the other. It should be sustainable. Remember that there's phasing. It might be different times of life or training or goals. Maybe you're doing an endurance event. You're doing a Tough Mudder with your friends. Yeah, you probably need to be doing a little bit more cardio before that, but it doesn't mean that needs to be for the rest of your life. It could be a phase, could be a season. But for most people, again, 2 to 3 times a week minimum for strength, 2 to 3 times per week, or 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio, or 75 minutes of vigorous. With that, that might be the longest answer to your question, David, but I hope that was super insightful and fun. Any thoughts on that kind of final recommendation, Danielle?
No, sounds good. I think we got it all covered.
We did, and just right at 45 minutes because I'm long-winded. So anyways, David, thank you so much for this. I know it was just kind of one lane over from the work that we predominantly do in nutrition. But training is so important for overall health. It's so important that we all learn how to balance and include these healthy lifestyle habits in our lives well after college, into our 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, all the way until we can become a 90-year-old bowler like my brother Jared, apparently. So with that, if this has been helpful, it's been our honor to walk through this question and some considerations. We'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Drop us a review, let us know how we're doing, and share it with a friend. We'd love to help as many people as possible. That's why we do this podcast for free with no sponsors, so that we can just simply give you the best advice we feel possible for free. And so if you're on social media, you can follow us at Imago Nutrition. That's at IMAGO Nutrition. And as always, we'd like to thank Happy Pill, the band, for our theme song, Thinkin Bout Food. We'll see you next time.